And a very good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to our Lyceum evening, coming to you from the Paul Christian Spiritualist Church down on the south coast of the UK. Great delight to manage to have a very busy man come online with us tonight. Lovely Mr. Mark Stone. Mark, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Laurie. Evening, everyone. Nice to be here.
Wonderful, and thank you so much for gifting us your time this evening.
Right, you're welcome. It's my favourite subject. And only for you, Lawrence. Only for you, if Lawrence asks.
Are you listening, world? Are you listening?
When Lawrence asks, you do.
We didn't last week. But anyway.
I'll do it all the time.
Great. I've invited Mark along tonight because he is put your fingers in your ears, love, because I'm going to big you up. He really is a wonderful exponent for trance mediumship. I've privileged to have Mark demonstrate his trance mediumship here at Paul in trance evenings, and also they tend to slip in every now and then in the services.
Yeah, can be sometimes a little. You feel it happen.
Yeah, you just sat there and I was listening, you could feel it, and I was listening to your voice, and there was that slight change. Oh, hello. Have you popped in? How wonderful. So, yeah, we're going to talk about trance mediumship tonight. Now, one of the reasons I'm asking this, because we're seeing a big sort of like upsurge in trance mediumship. A big upsurge in workshops, courses, etc. And it's one of those areas, isn't it? Would you agree, Mark, that you've got to go with your gut instinct with your teacher, not what people are saying, but actually how you feel about it. Would you agree there?
Yeah, I think the journey of trance and an unfoldment with mediumship as a whole is this sitting and feeling the movement. And again, when you talk about teachers, we think about, going on courses and workshops, but also that connection, with the teachers in the spirit world. And sometimes is a bit missing. It's all focused on who can I learn from here on earth, in the physical body, rather than also remembering that, we sit and let spirit guide us and spirit teach. And I think that, as we all know, we don't have to resonate with everyone. We're not everyone's cup of tea. And training and teaching styles are all different. And, when we're looking at trance, we're looking at a lot of dedication and a lot of time. We're looking at something where it's not a case of you're going to go and just do it in a weekend and that's it. That's trance. You've done it. You've ticked the box. It's a never-ending, unfolding journey with all mediumship, with all healing, with all trance and phenomena. It's not a finite point of, I've done that. It's always changing. It's always altering. It's always interweaving with everything. So I think going by how you feel and how things resonate with you or don't resonate with you. And again, even if there's someone you resonate with, there may be things within the trance or the experience that doesn't resonate with you. You might think, not sure about that. I'm not sure how that fits with me. So it's all about the observation of what's coming from within you. How does it feel? How does the experience of trance feel? How does a circle feel? Don't just go because, if you don't feel comfortable in a circle, you don't feel comfortable with the way it's running or the people that are in it or the person that's teaching it. Don't think, oh God, well, I need to be in a circle, so I may as well sit in this circle because it's the only opportunity I've got. If it doesn't feel right, there's often an underlying reason for that. If you work with someone or see someone and it doesn't feel right, trust that for you. It doesn't mean that necessarily it's wrong, but it's not resonating for you. It's an observation rather than a criticism of that medium or their work or their teaching style. It doesn't resonate with you. It doesn't fit with you. and finding people that you trust to sit and work with is vital, especially for trance, I believe.
No, absolutely. And you touched on part of my thinking here sometimes, that we tend to give away our power. This is not a criticism aimed at anybody, but I do pick up at times people pursuing trance mediumship because it's all going to be given by the other world and I've got no part in it. And I'm sorry, that doesn't sit well with me.
We are the medium. It has to operate within and through us. So exactly. We are a vital part. It doesn't mean, oh God, look at me. But also it doesn't mean we're the puppet of the other world. Which some people say, I can't help it because the spirit will make me. Unfortunately, that doesn't wash with me at all. You are consciously cooperating and working with the other world. You are having to learn to experience the phenomena, the way it works with you. Also, being willing to let someone else help you get out of sometimes the bad habits or the myths or the fears of what may be happening. Because there are things sometimes that happen in early stages of trance, which then people kind of think has to happen all the time. And therefore it becomes this crutch that it's got to happen this way for it to be trance. This has to happen in a certain way. It has to manifest in a certain way. And so sometimes we need to be open to the viewpoints of other people, especially if we ask other people. There's nothing worse. Don't ask a question you don't want an answer to. So if you ask someone and someone gives you their perception, and it's a perception, it's a view, it's an observation, you have to think about what you do with that and not necessarily take offense, but you've asked the question, what do you think, what do you feel? So that person can only be as honest as what they feel or perceive. And they may not perceive what you're perceiving, and that doesn't mean what you're perceiving isn't genuine. But again, bear in mind the person, the nature and the experience, maybe.
Yeah, very true. Picking up something you said there about at the beginning, where we can pick up things. And that is so true, isn't it? Because we can actually pick up a lot of barriers to our work at the very beginning. You know what? It wasn't until very, very recently. I don't know. I'm sure you came across this from the old school mediums, that if somebody walked across them while they were giving a message.
Sometimes they go tonto.
Yeah. Oh, hell, you've broken my link. That's it. Everything would go up in the air.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until very recently somebody was demonstrating. I think it was the lovely Tony Goswell. And somebody had to go. And that's fine. I'd rather they go and break the link than sit there in a puddle. But so they got up and totally unfazed. And it suddenly dawned on me. I thought, as a medium, you shouldn't be linking with the sitter.
Yeah.
You should be linking with the other world. So all this about you walking in front of you means that
distraction and indoctrination. If you say something's going to, because it's like, as you know, when we've done trance demonstrations, and I've said, if people have to go, if people have to get up, they can get up, they can go if they need to. If people are coughing or talking or whatever, it doesn't matter. Because you have some people that go, if anything happens in a room when there's trance going on, there's there's such a explosion of you shouldn't have been doing that. I've worked, or the people in the spirit world, my team have worked with me. We've had people ejected from trance demonstrations for being drunk, and I've not even known it's gone on.
Bugger, I thought I got away with that.
It was you. But the spirit, if we think about the trance state for a moment, as well as the mental state, bear in mind there was a question: is trance the same as physical mediumship? Trance mediumship is an aspect of mental mediumship. Hi, Jan. Trance mediumship is we refer to it as being an aspect of mental mediumship. So, although there are sometimes very physical feelings and effects when you're working in trance states, It doesn't necessarily mean that it's physical. Physical is normally when there is ectoplasm phenomena, something that is very an external thing that you can see and be aware of. But trance is that blending. Even physical phenomena, if we really want to be honest, is a blending of the power to an extent where the spirit world are able to do much more with you and through you, I suppose, is a polite way of putting it. But trance, mediumship, and altered states is probably a better way, because if you use the trance or trance states or trance medium, it kind of puts it in a box of this is what trance is. But if when you're on a platform working as a medium, your awareness has to shift from this conscious world into this more subtle world of the spirit, and you shift your mindset. And so you suddenly become aware, like Lawrence was saying, often, because when I'm working with Lawrence at Poole, I'm completely in safe hands and in that lovely environment. And so sometimes, and it's even happened with Lawrence, we've said when we shared the platform, last time we did a double evening, a double divine service, both of us were doing philosophy and both of us were demonstrating. And with both of us, when we were doing the philosophy, both of us had that influence where our voices changed, the power in the words changed. And it was like, oh, that's really interesting. We're both, and we said before the service, didn't we? God, doesn't it feel intense this morning? Doesn't it feel odd this morning? And this power just came. And so it's all about those degrees of blending, from what we might refer to being in a kind of a light trance or a light altered state, to it getting stronger and stronger, and there is less of the medium and more of the spirit world working through the medium, but the medium is still there.
Yeah,
the medium is still present at some degree, even with physical phenomena. The late lovely Colin Fry, I went to a number of seances with Colin over the years, and even he said, even in what seems a totally unconscious state of the medium, he can still influence or disrupt the phenomena. So the mind of the medium is still present, even in a seemingly unconscious state. So we're always present. We are the medium. We're part of the experience. We can't. Colin was Magnus and others in the seances. You got to meet a whole host of people. Magnus was lovely to speak to, but there were, in the seances, you'd have a whole group of people that would come through in the seance room and speak, and it was lovely. Lovely memories, lovely days. So physical and trance do kind of have a hand in hand in the seance room. If somebody is a physical medium, then trance has normally been the doorway to that. Not always, but mostly, because it's that deepening and working with. And the more we're surrendering and allowing the spirit world to lead and guide us, then, we're opening more to the potential, whatever that may be.
Very true.
Whatever that may be.
So, lovely Jan asking, can a trance state be a disadvantage to your health during the trance?
No. Lawrence will back me up with this. Lawrence will remember, it might have been, I don't think it's the first time you saw me necessarily in trance, but I had a real problem going back a number of years ago, just after Glyn passed away. I had a real problem with coughing in my chest, which was continuous. I couldn't get through a sentence without coughing or choking, or ending up having to excuse myself from a room because the coughing and the reflux and everything else was so violent. And I'd been booked to do a trance demo, and I was thinking, oh, how's this? How? And I just thought, you just got to trust. And the preamble to the trance, I was coughing and choking, and the minute the power built and I went, I think I spoke for an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours, and there wasn't a single cough, was there? And the minute I'd come back out of it and was fully conscious again, I couldn't get through a sentence without coughing. So trance itself, I don't personally believe there can be problems. If somebody was stupid enough to slap you or touch you or hit you, and I've had that happen, not hit me, but someone in a circle many, many years ago who should have known better, I was in that withdrawn state, that altered state, and somebody slapped my thigh, and it was like I had been in a car crash. My whole body just went up in the air, and it shook me. And that was again in the early days of things. So other people's misadventure may affect your nervous system, because again, when we're in an altered state, there can be a heightened state of perception. We can become hyper aesthetic. And that means that, when you finished a circle, or when you've had like a healing treatment or something and you're a bit spacey, it's because you're still a bit overly sensitive. You're overly hyped. That's why, normally in the old fashioned days of circle, what did we do after we had a circle? If you weren't a smoker, the smokers used to go out and have a quick fag. Everyone else would sit and have a cup of tea and a biscuit or two, or 3 or 4. So you do have some people to do with trance and physical medium that say, oh, well, if you're a trance and physical medium, you'll end up being a diabetic. I don't agree with that. I always talk to the spirit world about things that I've heard. And the spirit world said, well, if you've decided that because of the way you feel the energy affects you, you don't eat from lunchtime onwards, you sit in the evening, so you've left your body 6-7 hours without food, and then you've sat for 2 or 3 hours, whatever, and then after that you decide to eat chocolate, sweets, cakes, whatever.
McDonald's.
You're gonna send your blood sugars up, and that's not good for you. And eating then late at night is not necessarily good for you. That's not the mediumship. That's what you've chosen to do with your diet. It's not your mediumship. It's what you've chosen to do with your food as a result.
That is, I used to do it. I would not eat before I worked, and if I was working in the evening, I would go all day without food.
Yeah.
And then, God help you, because if you didn't stop moving, I'd eat it.
But that used to be a long held, if you become a trance medium or a thing. I mean, I've now, I've heard this through other people. I haven't heard this directly, but there seems to be a little bit of the rounds going that you shouldn't do healing on certain people because you're going to take on their illness. And that used to be a very old belief.
Yeah.
But people kind of have this idea that we're going to absorb and take in stuff, and we're going to be affected by. And the problem is, one of my things that I always teach people, one of the things I always teach people is that all energy follows thought. So if you believe there's going to be a problem because of X, Y, and Z, then you're going to manifest it.
Yeah.
So, if there's going to be a fear, if you're frightened of something, the fear is then going to create its own problems. So one of the biggest, not fears or issues maybe we all have when it comes to trance and life in general, is letting go of control and surrendering. And in life, a lot of people, including myself, are control monkeys. We want to be in control. We want to make sure that it's gonna work, it's going to affect. And the problem that can happen is then when we need to surrender to the trance state, we won't let go because we want to make sure what's happening. We want to be in control of what's happening. We want to be in the zone with what's happening. And so it can be a real difficulty for some people that they want to do trance, but they don't want to let go. So you can't be personally, unless you're going to work, and this is on the personal development side, unless you're going to work on being able to surrender and let go of control, trance is going to just be a frustration for you because you're not going to surrender. You're not going to let go. You're not going to let it happen because you're going to stay right on the edge of something happening and then keep pulling back.
Yeah. I do it.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Why is that happening? What you're going to say? That's the other thing I used to be. What you're going to say? I'm not letting you talk until I know what you're going to say. I don't want to look a fool. And I used to sometimes, if something happened in the early days of my home circle, if they talked about something that I didn't believe in or didn't agree with, I'd pull the trance to a halt and go, what the hell are you talking about? Why are you saying this?
Yeah.
And I'd pull it because I would be going, you can't say that. But of course, that's me thinking, I don't want people to think I think that. So it was about learning what they were going to say, what they were going to do, and how they were going to bring it. and having to surrender, knowing that they know what's right, what's important. And one of the things we've seen, isn't it, Lawrence, in the demonstrations that we've done at the rally days, is that the spirit world have talked about things that haven't happened yet, and then in a few months, or even sometimes only a couple of weeks, have then happened in the world events, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I've gone, wow, that shows, because that's not on my radar. It came in, and it's and again, that proves another element of, is it beyond us? Because I trained in speech and drama when I was young. I could sit and create a voice and sit and talk forever. I'm talking forever now. Lawrence hasn't said anything for ages, and we could do that. We could do that, but when the information that comes maybe goes beyond the knowledge of the medium, again, a bit like the evidence in mediumship, in platform mediumship or personal sittings, when there's an information that comes that's beyond that, then we start to go, oh, that's interesting. But again, to be able to get to that, we've got to be able to let the other world work through us to get to those levels. And sometimes there will be things and you think, why are they talking about this? I can remember being at a demonstration a number of years ago, and always in the demonstrations of trance, I say to people, what I want you to do is just send out your thoughts of a question to the other world, and then hopefully you might get the chance to ask it in person. But what's more interesting is when they talk about that subject before you physically ask.
Yeah. And
I was doing a demonstration at one church, and all of a sudden they started to say, well, those of you here that are researchers, there's nothing wrong with asking us to come in and help you with your research and your work. And I'm thinking, I can understand people saying explorers, because everyone in a spiritualist church is exploring. But I thought, why are they talking about researchers? What a weird thing to say. And I could hear it going on. I'm thinking, what are you on about? Anyway, at the end of the demonstration, a young lady came up and she said, I was going to ask a question, but it got answered. She said, I'm just about to start a PhD. And she said, my question was going to be, is it okay to ask the spirit world for help doing research, or is that considered cheating? and so the question was answered before she asked. And I was like, that's fantastic. I said, now that explains why they went onto a topic like that I've never heard them talk about before.
Yeah.
Because they knew who was in the room. They knew what was being asked. And that to me those are the moments that make me go, oh, I like that. That's good.
It's just good. Like when you talk to me, the altered states are like on a sliding scale. I think sometimes now, if anybody, I don't want to offend anybody, but I think sometimes people have this illusion that they're out of it and the other world's going to do all the talking.
Yeah.
It's not. And it's like you just very well said about, learning ourselves, learning to give up that control.
Yeah.
But I found myself having a conversation with somebody and you drift a bit and you're talking about something and in your head I'm going, I know I'm getting bloody old, but why the hell am I talking about this? And they go, well, it's really weird. You should say that. I go, oh, all right, then that's fine.
Yeah. Well, inspiration, which is how we might term that, is part of the doorway of the altered states, to become inspired. Yeah. So when we think about trance, we're not just saying, oh, you've got to sort of close your eyes and become a Chinaman, or a nun, or whoever, a vicar, or whatever it might be. It can be in your very full conscious state, but your mind drifts. So like going into alpha state, daydreaming. Often when we're having conversations with people, there's a little part of us that, although we're in the conversation, a little part of the mind's going la 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 off down the primrose path somewhere, and all of a sudden you say something and they go, what? Why have you said that? Because it's kind of that there's something touching on that otherworldly awareness. And it's drifting in. And whenever we talk about spirit world or talk about something, they're responding to that thought. The thoughts are blending with you. And that happens with everyone. I can almost guarantee everyone that's listening and watching will have had experiences where they're sat with someone they know and they're chatting away, and then all of a sudden one person goes, do I was just thinking, I wonder how so-and-so is, and the other person goes, I was just about to say that. And you're kind of in each other's energy and you're feeling. That's that move and shift of energy as you're expanding your energy, your awareness, without consciously doing it. And the same happens then with the spirit world. We can be somewhere, the mind drifts a bit, and suddenly we become aware. It doesn't always mean we're becoming aware of the spirit world. Some people do that when they go to historic locations and they kind of sit there and drift, and all of a sudden they're seeing a battle from 200 years ago. Now, it doesn't mean they're seeing the spirit world, but they're picking up on the energy and the memory of place.
Yeah.
And like psychometry, really, if you like, psychometry of the place.
Yeah.
And people do that, and then they go, oh, well, this is just a spontaneous experience. Well, it isn't. You're relaxing and you're just letting your mind drift. That's what mediumship is. We let our mind drift to the other world.
Yeah.
It's only a shift of state of mind. It's an altered state of awareness.
Definitely. Quickly go over to some of the comments.
Oh. Hello. I'm a jet late.
Can you smell Chardonnay?
Where's that photo, Tony? Now with your well-deserved glass of wine after a fantastic event.
TGVG, good evening.
Hello.
What to look for when building a home circle with people? That's a really good question.
Peace and harmony is the first key.
Oh, well.
A circle. If you can find it. Okay. A home circle. Loads of people have their own different opinions, and again, you have to find out what works well for you. Is going to be the ultimate to this, because I know some really good trance mediums who only sit with one other person, and one person just sits for them. I know other people that say, well, I've been told I've got to have 6 or 8 people. Trying to get 8 people to commit to you every week for months, if not years, can be difficult, can be problematic. And again, it depends if it's the right time for you to have a circle. And I know that might sound odd, but the spirit world are also aware of your life and your life circumstances and I believe, what's ahead of you in your life. And I'll give you an example of this. I had a home circle that was sitting for me for trance and / physical. And I had... Did I have slash physical? Very, very physical there. And it was a horror, that circle. No, it wasn't. And I had 8 people sitting for me. They were very dedicated. They were really good. And I went down to Paignton Church to do a weekend down there. And a lovely friend of mine who's also really into his trance and physical mediumship, Peter Egan, we were sitting outside a pub just having a drink, and he drifted. He went into that space and he went, He said, you've got a home circle sitting for you for sort of trance and physical, haven't you? And I went, yeah. And he said, don't worry, but you won't have a circle by Christmas. And I went, oh, thanks. That's really nice to hear. Thank you very much. And I thought, right. And as I got back, this was only in August. And when I went back, was listening to a couple of answer machine messages, and 2 of my sitters pulled out. So I went down to 6. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe that message is prescient and making sure that, I'm not going to, not to worry. Because he said, don't worry about it. It's just what the spirit world needs you to know, not to worry about the fact that it's pulling away at the moment. Then another 2 ended up dropping off. So we're down to 4 by end of October. And then the other 2 people started to have problems with their health and whatever. And it left me with 2. Now, those 2 people had been long-term sitters, never missed, and had no intention of going anywhere. And I thought, there's no way. I can still sit with 2. That's fine. We'll still keep sitting. We'll still keep doing. And literally the week before Christmas, they went, just to let you know, we're not going to be able to do circle anymore because we've decided to open a business from home. And we need to be available daytime into evening every single day of the week. And so the week before Christmas, I had no circle. And then the following year, life got really hectic because that's when I opened my centre and didn't have the time to commit to it. So the spirit world knew what was coming, and everything was engineered so that it didn't need to be running, and it was out of my hands, because I would have kept trying to keep sitting and running the business and doing the church services and doing the second job and I would have killed myself, basically. So it was dealt with. So the right time in the right place find a group of sitters who are genuinely interested in long-term commitment, not just a bit of phenomena, not just a bit of a giggle. You need people, and finding sitters for trance, let's be honest, most people want to develop themselves. Sitters for trance are about sitting for you without expectation or demand on you. And finding those people may or may not be that easy. You might find and meet people that you feel drawn to, or that you feel the other world have brought into your circumstance. And the thing to do, and we always used to have this at my home circle, was everybody came in on a 4-week trial. And they could come and sit for 4 weeks. And at the 4-week point, if I or my circle leader didn't feel that it was the right fit, or the sitter didn't like the way we were sitting or doing anything, there was an option for them to leave at that point without any animosity or whatever. It was to see if it was the right fit for them. And a circle leader, if there's only 2 of you sitting, the other person is your circle leader. They are the ones who will have that sense of, this is when we're sitting, this is when we're going to finish sitting. If they feel something's not right, or something's not good for you, or there's something up, then they will be the ones that sort of say, no, I think we need to close the circle now, we need to finish, or start calling you back or whatever. If you've got a whole group of people, that circle leader needs to be able to deal with the rest of your circle. It shouldn't be you having to deal with them. They're almost like your PA, or the PA to the spirit world, is to kind of give you that idea of saying, before trance, I know I'm jumping around a bit, but different things keep coming in. Before I used to sit for trance and physical, I would often get tetchy. I would get irritable. And so when people would come in for circle night and they're like, and I did this, I would just be going out of my head with chatter, and I'm just like, I can't deal with this. So what used to happen with my circle was the first person who arrived then stayed near the front door and let everybody else in. They chatted in the hallway. They got all of their out the way. And I was already sitting in the room waiting for them, already sitting in that power. They came in, and we had opening prayer and off, and we were away. And then when we finished, I was happy to chat. But beforehand, I would become this little tetchy ball of, for heaven's sake, be quiet. We need to get on with this. And so I would let them do everything they needed to do outside. So when they came into the room with the focus of, we're here to sit for spirit, we're here to sit for our medium, and that's what we're going to do. And so, it doesn't matter whether you have more men or women. Some people like to have even numbers of men and women for the energy. You've got to... We are taught to use our control. You might want to bring up Marie's one, and you might need to clarify it. We are taught to use our discipline and control in mediumship. Are you saying this goes out the window? In what respect, Marie? Can you write a little more on that for me? Because, yes, there is a level of trance and discipline that's there, because we have to be able to keep ourselves focused. But can you expand upon what you feel is going out of the window? Because we have to be disciplined to sit. We have to be disciplined in... When I say discipline sounds like it's the opposite of the same as control, but it's not. We have to learn to sit and work and allow this influence to build, and let the other world lead us more. It's not about being undisciplined, though. But explain it more. There might be something that you can explain a bit more in that. So we'll let you write that, type away, and we'll come back into that. Okay. Oh, well, you're surrendering your conscious control. So you're not being undisciplined. What you're trying to do is stop you being the one that's trying to make everything happen. So when people...
You're sat in the passenger seat and spirit is driving, but you're still there.
And we use the term for the spirit communicator often as the control. That used to be the old-fashioned term. I don't know whether many people still use it, but often what you're doing is you're allowing the other world to take a greater purchase on your mind. Okay, so it's still working through you, but you are not trying. This is taking us into some interesting territory. So somebody can sit, and a bit like self-hypnosis, they can induce the trance state without discarnate spirit influence. So I've seen people start to move and respond in a way that would normally be when the spirit world starts to affect them, but there's no spirit world affecting them. You can, when you look into the auric field, you can see that there's no energy that's there from the spirit world, it's them. You can always, people can also induce a spoken state, and it's them. It's like a pseudo trance. It's coming from them. It's not coming from the discarnate spirit. It's coming from the incarnate spirit, the self, which sometimes when you notice that happen with someone and you notice that it's more from them than the spirit world, but they're convinced it's the other world, then it's sometimes difficult to try and, in the gentlest of ways, say, I'm not really sure that's really the spirit world, but more coming from within you. You know, if you read people like Harry Edwards' information on trance, and Gordon Higginson, when you listen to some of his talks on it, there's sometimes a lot of having to get your stuff, your subconscious, your voice out the way. And some, again, I'm going to get myself into trouble. I've seen a lot of physical and a lot of trance mediums over the years, a lot. Not only as an observer, but also in teaching circumstances. Oh, lovely. I'm glad we've covered that for you, Marie. And I have seen even mediums on platforms at paid for demonstrations creating the trance phenomena themselves rather than it being discarnate spirit influence.
Yeah.
But they would tell you 100% it's the spirit world, and they're not even aware that any of it's going on. But it doesn't resonate. You can. There's a certain quality, and I don't quite know. Those of you in the room here that have sat within trance seances or trance demonstrations, again, your observations are crucial when you go to these. How does it make you feel? How does it touch you? Also, what are you aware of, even with the response of the other world, when you're watching and listening? And there's times, and I've sat and I've kind of sat there going, oh dear, and then all of a sudden something happens, and there's a glimmer of something from the other world, and then it disappears again. And then you think, oh, so there's something there with them. But a lot of maybe what else is around it is more them, or the need for them to create certain things, certain personalities, and difficult.
This isn't going to be popular.
Shall I order in another 2 gross of Lawrence Voodoo dolls for this one?
Yes, please.
I'll pop up. I've got some shelf space. It's fine.
But I'm intrigued when certain phenomena is scheduled to be running X amount of times a month at X amount of pounds, shillings, pence, dollars per head. And to date, I've never seen anybody say, do you know what, folks? It's not working tonight. Here's your money back. I'm really sorry. I'm not being offensive.
No.
Being nasty. It's an observation.
Anyway, I was at, go on. I was at an event with Colin Fry, actually a private séance held, funnily enough, down here in Bournemouth, and he came to visit somebody who had quite a large home, and we were all in this room for this séance. This was in the early days before Colin was on TV, so this was prior to him being a theatre and TV kind of medium. And we were in this séance, and the house that it was in, they put it in this lovely big extension room, but they got this massive patio doors. And because it was a phenomena seance, the general thought is that you need to black out and have no light for parts of the seance, which I know some people really have a big issue with, because things can happen in the dark, etc., etc. Anyway, so they put this big, like, blackout, whatever it was, whether it was a plastic tarpaulin or it was something, but it was literally light blocking, so it was perfect. But halfway through the seance, and stuff was starting to happen in the room, and all of a sudden the tarp dropped, because it was so hot in the room, because there were all these people. The tarp dropped and light came in, and as that light came in, when you stand in a subway and a train comes in and you get that suction of air that pulls, literally as soon as the slightest bit of light came in, this energy, this airflow went into the seance cabinet. And the control, I don't think it was Magnus, I'm not sure whether it was his little boy, and my brain's not working tonight, I can't remember. Charlie, his guy, was saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's fine. It's just the energy shifted a bit in here, but we'll deal with it." And all of a sudden, I realised that where their patio doors were, there was a security light that if any cats or anything went past, it would light up and flood the whole room. And I said, "I think you need to know there's a security light outside, and because that's come down, there could be light at any minute." And the spirit team said, "Then we will just have a trance evening, because we don't want to hurt the medium should anything like a bright light come on in the room." And that's what kind of happened. But the physicality of when that curtain dropped and this pull of energy went straight back to the cabinet, and everyone in the room felt it. And there were other people in the room going, "No, he can carry on." And it's like, you don't understand what the potential issue is if ectoplasm comes out and then light hits it. And he was more ectoplasm than when people are talking about protoplasm and energy and things like that. It was literally, it would stream out and move things and do things. And I sat in a number of seances with Colin, and there was phenomena I could not get my head around without half the room being in collusion with him. There was stuff that moved around us beyond several rows, back through, all sorts of stuff, So yeah, his stuff was phenomenal. I miss those days.
Yeah. We have the lovely Reverend Ron Cox from
Hiya, Ron.
Hello, Ron.
Does prescribe medication. Depends on what it is and how it affects you, your mind, and your body. Technically, nothing should be necessarily a barrier. However, so for instance, if we think about the way that the altered states affect blood pressure, central nervous system, same as if we were doing healing, it's going to affect the blood pressure, it's going to affect central nervous system. So of course, if you were having, say for instance, if you had to take blood pressure meds, for instance, I'm not saying this is a given, I'm giving this as an example, so don't jump on me, anyone, not unless you pay, and
wrong
people, blood pressure meds. So if when you go into the altered state, your blood pressure lowers because we become more subdued, which happens when we do meditation. If you do meditation, people will tell you, meditation teachers, to be aware of your blood pressure, because if you're taking blood pressure medication to lower it and then you do something that lowers it even more, it can have a bit of an effect. The same as, insulin things because of eating, which we said a bit earlier. If you're diabetic already and you take insulins and things like that, you've just got to be mindful of, what am I doing? How long am I sitting? Is it going to affect me? What have I got to do with food? What have I got to do when I finish? And you've got to be sensible. The thing is, you'll only find out. I mean, obviously, one of the difficult areas, and we need to be very, very honest with this with people when we're sitting and working with them, is mental health and mediumship. And over the years, I've come into contact with a few people that have had difficult experiences in life. They have had certain diagnosed psychiatric conditions, which then really kind of start to preclude us from going down the mediumship route, because some conditions mean that there is a difficulty at discerning what's real, what's not real, or very fast switching states of emotion or personality. Sometimes mediumship is not going to be in the best interest of that person. Healing might benefit them, but developing and trying to, especially things like trance, mediumship and stuff, where we're then having the idea of another personality that's talking with us and through us, could be problematic. And so there are beautiful people, a few people over the years that I've had to say, I don't think this is the right journey for you. And it would be irresponsible of me to keep taking you into any form of working with the other world in this way, because it could be detrimental to your health mentally and physically. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of our own mental health. We have to be aware of our own stresses and strains. We have to be aware of our own physical health. So I don't directly know that any particular medication is going to cause you a problem, but if you had a medication that was kind of dulling your senses, when we talk about trance and mediumship, we talk about heightening our senses, heightening our awareness. So it may be working in a contradictory way. Again, only through your own experience of sitting. Think of the fact often doctors will say to you, well, we're going to try you on this med, see how you get on, and then if you don't get on with it, we might change it. It might even be the same when it comes to your sitting. You might find that sitting too close to when you take certain medication, you might find makes you feel uncomfortable or makes you feel nauseous. So you may have to change the time of sitting, possibly, or the way of sitting.
Brilliant. You've touched on this now with your experience with Colin Fry. Jamie Williamson's asking the opinion of the case of Helen Duncan, who was supposedly harmed.
Yeah. I think in physics, I've as I said, I had the issue with trance from early days. Trance and physical has always been my passion, and I've read a lot of things, and I read the cases of Helen Duncan and things like that, the good books that were done on that. I haven't watched the TV thing that's been on yet, the 4-part thing, The Last Witch in Scotland or England or whatever it was. I haven't watched that yet. I will be watching it on iPlayer because I want to catch up on that. So don't spoil it for me. No spoilers.
The end.
Oh, you've ruined it now.
Oh, sorry.
But reports that used to be written about this were that, and you're going to have to forgive the graphicness of what's happening. But it was always said that ectoplasm could come out of any orifice in the body. And loads of people have the idea it's just going to come out your mouth or out your nostrils. But there are photographic replicas and things of it coming out of people's ears, coming out of people's nips. And there are even reports of it coming lower down of the body in the genital area as well. Something got a little flush there.
Yes. And a tad warm in here.
Yes, a tad warm in here. But it's because we just automatically assume it's going to be here, but there's nothing that says that it is. I mean, it's said, and I can't think whether it was a talk that Gordon was doing. Oh man, I can't remember. But talking about even it kind of almost coming out of the pores of the body like a mist or a vapor, and then starting to solidify out of pores. So, again, there's maybe things that we've get the idea of that we're going to sit there and be kind of, as a physical medium, although tonight's about trance, we're talking about Ellen Duncan now, that the idea that it's always just going to come out of the mouth and it's always going to come from there. The mouth and the nose is all interconnected, as is ears, as is anywhere else. So, and it is, from the body, don't get freaked out about it. Seances are lovely, Deborah. Seances are absolutely lovely. And the fact of Here we're going to be controversial again. The amount of actual physical mediums sitting and doing and whatever, it's not for most people to be physical mediums, I don't really think, because you have to again go through a lot of sitting, a lot of practice and awareness and things like that. And if it's right for your makeup and right for your spirit team in that way to work with you in that as well. But a seance, I can tell you, sitting in those seances in pitch black, which for some of you will just think even sitting in a pitch black room would freak you out. But I can remember sitting in seances, and at the beginning of a rock concert, there's that of energy of all the crowd just waiting for this marvelous performance on stage to begin, was how I used to feel it in seances. And it was just so elating. It wasn't freaky. It wasn't frightening in any way, shape, or form. It was electrifying. It was exciting, because you knew you were about to sit with the other world, with whatever happened, even if nothing happened phenomena wise, but you just had that lovely closeness of what was going on, of how things were. And loads of people would always go, "Oh, that sounds really spooky and freaky." And so honestly, when I sat in seances and I saw a disembodied hand in the glow of a luminous plaque, and this hand appeared out of a dot and then moved around, and you could see it in the round, and then it just shrank into the ball again and disappeared. And I was just like, and that was like 2 foot away from my face. And I was like, wow, that is cool. And it was just forgetting the fact that I'd just seen a totally disembodied hand materializing. It was just, that's amazing.
This is one of the difficulties we face. And it's very hard to try and get this over to people. These sort of demonstrations, physical and trance, they are an experience.
Yeah.
When you hear it relayed secondhand, it's lost the magic of it.
Yeah.
When we have a trance speaker here, you can guarantee 80%, minimum 80% of the congregation are sat there with their eyes closed and just immersing in that atmosphere.
In the energy, yeah. And there is, this is the thing. This is like when you were talking about the home circle. Sitting in home circles was, for me, I couldn't wait. Once home circle, I couldn't wait for another 5 or 6 days to pass till we were sitting again. It was so exciting, because it's like, this is really good. And that kind of desire just to be so excited to sit and work with your spirit friends and sit with your spirit friends as well as your circle as well. And that enjoyment and that enjoyment has to be there, because, it's long term. The difficulty that the reason we had so many sort of old fashioned, and I don't mean old fashioned, but in the olden days, the fashion of circles that we had was because we didn't have smartphones attached to the end of our hands 24/7. We didn't have, some houses didn't have televisions. They had a wireless if they were lucky. Some households, weren't it? They didn't have that. So there was a need for that, and there was also, because of the 2 world wars, there was a real desire to know that lost loved ones were all right. So there was a real resurgence and a real, not a resurgence, but kind of an upsurge in mediumship and home circles. And the home circle, certainly for the trance side of things, is one of the key essentials, to see and to understand and let these things develop. But again, it's having that, when people used to say, should I be sitting as a trance medium? The point is, you should be sitting for spirit. If you want to be a healer, sit for spirit. If you want to be a platform medium, sit for spirit and sit to be with spirit. The difficulty is people these days want fast track. So they'll kind of start sitting with mediumship, and then they'll want to go and have a spiritual assessment to be told what they should do. And instead of still exploring the gamut of mediumship, if you look at a lot of the old-fashioned mediums, they explored all areas of mediumship, healing, awareness, psychism, and found what came to the surface, what was the niche. Whereas sometimes people now, they've said, I've been told I'm going to be a trance medium, and I'm going to sit for trance mediumship. And then everything else goes out the window. But it might be that their trance mediumship is intrinsically linked with healing. So if they followed the healing path, their trance mediumship may come out of that.
That rings a bell from a certain day.
But that's the thing. I'm of the belief you sit and you sit and you sit and you explore and see where that exploration leads. And nothing is fixed. A lot of people know me for kind of being on platforms with you guys. But my great love is healing. But people don't always necessarily think of that when they think of me. They think of me on platform, or sometimes, sometimes the trance, as you said. But my love is healing. That was the first thing I was shown as a child. Nan's not feeling well. Can you put your hands on her and ask our spirit to take it? And that's what I started doing when I was like 2 or 3 years old. It's what I was brought up in. So, and out of sitting with spirit, other things started to manifest. It wasn't a case of I'm going to be. I was always fascinated by everything to do with the spirit world. But trance and physical was just fascinating to me, because for my why does this happen? How does this work brain? The boy who always asked why, trance and physical fascinated me because it made me feel like there's physical, empirical truth and fact.
Yeah.
And that's what then made me like, that's fascinating. I want to see this. I want to have, although I believed in the spirit world, there's a certain something, if things manifest and your physical senses are then brought face to face with it. Even not in a seance room, I've seen spirits solidly, externally. And I've gone, oh, there's so-and-so there. And then I've walked on by and gone, they're dead. And it doesn't. I don't necessarily get a lot of objective clairvoyance. But when I've had it, it's just been like, wow.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't looking for it, I wasn't searching for it. It just happened. And there was a moment of someone or something so solid, so real. And that for me was like, okay, that was good. And then I've had those experiences with other friends where more than one of us have seen the same thing in a room happen at the same time in full daylight, and gone, did you see that? Because you don't want to give it away to the other person. They go, what? The doorway that appeared in the wall and the person who put his head through. And I went, that's the one. And we both saw it at the same time. And it's just like, well, that's good. Yeah. Have another glass of wine. Let's see what else we can see.
Lovely. Tim,
Hi,
how are you? Hopefully we're going to see you on the 3rd of May when we come up for the open day.
Yay! Fabulous.
I'm pretty sure he's there. Hopefully you are.
He's going to change his day now. You've told him we're coming.
Yeah. Take himself off Saturday. I'll do Monday instead. Thanks, Tim.
I wonder how much was that.
So Tim's asking, wonder how Mark feels about the following. In the old days, teachers used to promote when a medium sits for trance. There should be a marked difference with intelligence of the guide. For me, in modern days, that's very undermining of the media. What I look for is a difference, not necessarily an elevated intelligence.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, we know that the spirit world, I mean, when we sort of look at the idea of why do mediums, when they sit often for trance, have certain types of personalities, certain behaviors, mannerisms, accents, why does it always happen to be like that? And I've asked the spirit world and they've said, well, we do that more for you than we need it for us, because it makes you feel that there is a differentiation between you and the other world, so that you can feel like it's not you. Which I kind of get. It's a bit like, if your guide comes in the form of an animal, it's not necessarily that they were an animal, but if you don't like and trust people, but you trust animals, you're going to trust an animal more than you're going to trust a person. And people in the spirit world, like us here, have their different perspectives, their different life experiences. One of the people that works with me who works more on a healing level. He used to speak in private circles. He never spoke in public circle. Before he passed to the spirit world, he was a drug addict and an alcoholic. He was a laudanum addict. And he talked about how depression and losing your faith would affect his life and how it affected him. And his was interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say he talked about great high-minded things. He talked about his experience, but he would always draw close when I was working with anyone who had had some form of addiction. And therefore I knew the minute that I'd feel him draw close when I was doing healing, I would know there's an addiction issue around that person. So his life experience was a different life experience to mine. I would find it very difficult to understand at times, especially when I was younger, the idea of how can someone get so addicted to something. Although then again, chocolate's been the bane of my life, and cheese, crikey, cheese is worse than crack cocaine for me. If I was let loose in Harrods Cheese Hall, that would be me. That'd be a happy death. That would be a happy death. But I wouldn't necessarily understand that. So his perspective would bring through something different. And bear in mind that when we're talking about this trance controls and these guides and helpers, they often will say, I'm talking on behalf of others, not just me. So again, it may not be just their knowledge, their level of experience. Unfortunately, I think in the media, they've got some funny ideas about trance. There's been some funny takes done on mediumship. People have never seen Shirley Ghostman, at the time that came out, there was a furore across spiritualist churches about this guy who was taking the serious Mickey out of spiritualism. But what was interesting was it was incredibly well observed, and a lot of what went on in that comedy show I had seen in churches, seances and circles and workshops. So it was well observed. And unfortunately, I think when it comes to the media in general, it's very hard for them to take any medium seriously in a way. There are people who are working out there in the public domain and do get publicity for who we are and what we do. Whether it's always, everyone's going to have an opinion on it. There are going to always be people that are going to try and undermine us. There are always going to be people, even in our movement, that end up pulling the carpet out from under our own feet because they think, I want to be famous. Someone's offered to make a documentary about me. And then the documentary absolutely castigates everything and undermines it all. And I think it's very difficult. I know there have been independent films and independent documentaries that have been made about the spirit world and phenomena and, different people's experiences. And that's fine. And they're good at what they're doing. They're an independent thing. So, they're in that way. But then you do have mainstream media that often wants to portray a lot of us as mentally unwell, and often, the likes of This Morning having that problem. Yeah. They have people on that. Oh, I married a ghost and now I'm pregnant by him, and it's like then every medium in the world gets covered by that.
Might want to rephrase that.
What? I don't know what I said then to have to rephrase it. Sorry.
I got pregnant by her and everybody's covered in it.
Right, okay. Tarred with the same brush, I meant.
No, that's much better. That's actually, I love that question. Thank you, Tim. It does touch on something I observe with reincarnation. That's the only time we're going to mention it. That, so often with reincarnation, it's very rare that you would hear of somebody who I was a peasant farmer.
Yeah.
I was always a handmaid to...
I shoveled the dung, yeah.
Yeah. I was always a handmaid to Aphrodite or something like that, or I was a captain of the guard. And it's sort of like, well, you know what? We're in touch with everything.
And picking up on Tim's thing, because obviously also through the trance state, and we haven't talked on this, you can have evidential trance mediumship where loved ones speak through. And so therefore it becomes evidential, not necessarily philosophical. You know, a lot of what we see as trance mediumship, and a lot of our movement has been based on the teachings, has been philosophical and sort of teachings that come through. But, you know, people in my own private circle, not ever in public, and I don't kind of know why that is, but it's always only been done in public. People have had loved ones come through and speak in private, and that I found fascinating, because of it feels so different to when you're giving a message from someone on a platform. But one of my issues probably with that is that the little control monkey steps in and goes, "Don't muck this up. Don't get in the way of this." But again, that would be a different personality, a different nature. Not necessarily, you know, have they got a higher conscience or intelligence? It's someone's loved one coming through and having that level of control.
Yeah, because that's what Tim says there about what he looks for is a difference.
Yeah.
And you notice it, don't you? Because you say a word and you're like, "Oh, that's not my word. Oh, hello."
Yeah. Or the feeling, you notice your own voice changing as you're speaking and going, "What's happening there? That's not how I normally speak." And you can hear it almost coming out of you differently. You know, so it's again a degree of influence. You know, it's interesting. At one point on the journey, and I talked to Glyn about this, and I said something really weird's going on with the trance state. It's all of a sudden turned to just saying "we" rather than "I" when they were talking. We, and I said, and I'm not always able to discern which of them is talking. It's just we're talking, and I said, and it feels really odd. And he said, "Well, why shouldn't it be we? Why does it have to just be the one that moves through the mind? Why can't they all have an influence that's coming through? Why does it need to be just focused on a spokesperson?" I was like, yeah, I get that. And it's interesting. It didn't necessarily stay for that long, but it became this melding of all these minds.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it changed again. And it was just for a short period, but it fascinated me because it changed, because I was always thinking, oh, it always happens like this or it always happens like that. And then it would change. Mediumship constantly changes and evolves in our practice. It doesn't stay the same. It shouldn't really stay the same. It's continually exploring, expanding, changing.
People currently are saying, "Oh, the way spirit worked with us has changed," and I say, "Well, no, actually, we've changed."
Yes, we're evolving into the understanding more and more of
we're
our
looking
own
at different
way
things.
of working. Yeah,
and the spirit, okay.
Yeah, and if we're willing, you know, sometimes again, in all areas of our mediumship, not just trance, people set these. It always happens like this. This is how mediumship works. This is how and I can remember Peter Egan down at Paynton. He was saying one day, he said he was chairing for another medium, a long-standing medium who'd worked for many years, and he said, so we just had the hymn before the demonstration, and he said he turned to her, and just as she stood up, she went, "Oh, is that how we're working today?" And then got up and demonstrated. And he said, I just found it so lovely that even with all her years, they would go, "Oh, this is different. Is that how we're going to work?" And I thought, how lovely is that? Because for all of you that are out here, because we've got a lot of working mediums, we never know what a demonstration is going to be like. We never know what a trance demonstration is going to be like. We don't know what a healing is going to be like. We don't know what a circle or a workshop may bring, no matter how planned we think we've got it. There's always going to be something unique in the mix that happens. And so that's the wonder. If it was the same every time, I think boredom would set in.
Yeah.
Complacency would set in. But sometimes there are things that happen and you go, "Oh, that pushed me out of my comfort zone," or "Oh, I wonder what was happening there." And then that makes us go and explore.
We'd end up doing away with the principle about continuing progression of the human soul, because
absolutely
it wouldn't progress. It's simple as that.
Yeah, you end up going backwards rather than forwards.
Exactly. Reverend Ashley. What a Reverend.
Oh, yeah. Haven't seen you for all of several hours.
Really good, actually. Thank you. This is brilliant. And she says, it has been allowed for so many years for spiritualists to be the subject of ridicule that would not be allowed for many other faiths or beliefs past. This is my opinion.
Well, I would say look back at Dave, one of my favourite comedians, Dave Allen. The Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church got it in the ribs mercilessly. And actually, let's be fair, if you're a follower of comedy, whether you believe it's much comedy or not, actually all religions come under the fire. But I think with spiritualism, the seance, the lure of the seance, there was a wonderful episode of Steptoe and Son, where Patricia Routledge played an off-the-wall trance medium, bringing through the likes of Cleopatra and Mark Antony and Augustus and all sorts of people. But spiritualism has fascinated as well as feared, and therefore it's brought ridicule. If you've got BBC iPlayer at the moment, they've also got not the documentary. That's wrong. The dramatised version of the story of the Cottingley fairies that conned a load of scientists, two little girls. But it's a fascinating story. So if you watch it, I don't know what it's called, but I think if you just put onto BBC iPlayer Cottingley fairies, you'll probably find it. But people have been fascinated always, but orthodoxy, and if I say orthodoxy as in anyone that isn't pro-spiritualism, whether it's media or other people, will always try to tear down. But that's the nature with anything. Yeah. That's the nature with any religion, and it does happen with every other religion. No religion is off of someone else's radar or target. And it's one of those things. I can remember having to cross a picket line of Christians to get into Bath Road Church, going, you're in league with the devil and you're this and you're that. And it's just like, no, I know my belief and I'm happy with my belief. Thank you very much. Can I go through? And I've had that even in more recent years. We had somebody, unfortunately, someone left a workshop early and committee member didn't lock the front door after they went. And just as we were coming out of a meditation, a woman came in screaming her head off that we were all going to burn in hell. And that was a really lovely awakening from the meditation. But she had been fired up by another person in her church who came with her and just watched this poor woman going absolutely mental, and just so upset and so aggressive with everyone. I mean, screaming and shouting at the top of her lungs, and it was terrible. And this guy was just standing back and letting him. He said, "You need to take your friend out of here. This is an act of religious crime. It's a religion. You need to take her out, and you need to calm her down. She's distressed." But she was screaming, shouting, and then a week later, she went to another spiritualist church in the area and did the same thing. And now the thing is, other beliefs believe that they need to go out and save souls, and we are in league with the devil, and therefore they're going to come and tell us, or any other religion, that they're wrong. So you kind of have to think the motivation deep down is right, maybe for them, but the execution is not.
Yeah.
We do not go into another person's church and go, "You're wrong, we're right." Some spiritualist churches in the country do interfaith meetings and have speakers from every faith come to talk in the spiritualist church, and then they go and talk at other churches so that they understand what spiritualism is. And kind of, if we believe that the spirit world is compiled of all people, then all religions have a validity somewhere. Spiritualism doesn't own the spirit world. Spiritualism is just a construct here of one belief, but every belief has core truths in it. And so we don't own the spirit world as spiritualists. Every other belief is kind of there waiting for us and has entry. It's not going to be a case of, if you only believe in our club, you're the only one that will be going. Not a private member club.
It's not like Thorpe Park. We're not going to get fast tracked to the front of the queue.
Well, no. Well, we might. Depends on who's up there. I'm making sure that Glyn will sort it out for me. Don't you know who I am? Get me to the front of that queue. But yeah, it's difficult when people, because I was very much. I mean, those of you who've known me a long time know that when I was in my 20s, I was kind of evangelical. I was going to tell everyone how true the spirit world was, and I'm gonna take up every argument that anyone wants to pose. And in the end, I realised that there are people who are not going to listen, no matter what. Yeah. And therefore, do I just need to save my breath for someone else who wants to listen? And actually, there's been times I've had, the conversations in the pub when someone finds out who you are, what you do, they want you to prove something. I say, well, come to the church tomorrow. You don't have to pay anything to get in. You can see a demonstration of mediumship, and you can hear some philosophy, and then come and tell me what you think. And it's interesting the amount of people that have never turned up offered that challenge.
Yeah.
Where there's no bar to entry other than they've got to walk through a door.
Yeah. This is
so,
the idle thing.
Well, make it happen now. Make it happen now. And I used to be very naughty. If I was out drinking with friends and someone said, go on then, give me a message now. And I go, oh, what do you do for a job? I'm a builder. Build me a wall now. Yeah. Well, I'm not at work. Neither am I. Bye. And that would be it, because I'm not, mediumship, although it can be exciting and we could do it in any location at any time because it's only a shift in our awareness, we have to consider time and place, appropriateness, and the ramifications of what we're doing, and therefore we some people might goad us, and sometimes out of naivety we might think, right, I'm going to prove my point now, but actually it's not always the right environment and the right way to do something in. But sometimes there are moments where there's something that just happens and you feel that influence. I was out with friends in a club and we'd been drinking, and I was in this club and I just looked across the bar and there was a guy sat at the bar and it just looked black around him, is the only way I can describe it. And I was like, all right, ignore. And then the next minute, somebody started to talk to me from the spirit world saying, I'm his granddad. I want you to talk to him. I want you to. And mate, I'm in a pub. I've been drinking. No way am I. And this granddad would not let up. And I was like, right, the only way this works, because I'm not at work, if he talks about you, then I will talk about you. Yeah. But otherwise, this isn't happening because I don't know him. I don't know what's going on. So anyway, I said to my mates, I'm just going to go to the bar and grab a drink, and stood next to this guy and was like, hi, because you've got to wait for people to get to you at a bar. I said, hi, you all right? And he went, no, I'm not. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And he said, I just don't know what to do with my life. I wish my granddad would hear because he would know. And I was like, okay. I said, right. I said, I need to tell you something. And the conversation started. And I sat with this young guy for probably over an hour and a half talking to him and bringing whatever. It wasn't a reading, but it was part listening, supporting, and bringing in stuff about granddad. And my mates were like, what are you doing? And I just went, it's fine. It's okay. Just leave me, because they were used to that stuff would happen. People would always end up crying around me and then talking to me for ages. And
that wasn't the mediumship.
No, that was just me. Anyway, we finished the conversation and he said, I don't know what I would have done if I'd have left here without speaking to you. And he's still a friend now, 30 years later. And the other day he said, look what I found when I was clearing out a desk drawer. And it was, the bar ordering tickets used to have, that used to write the order pads on. And I'd written my phone number and I said, if ever you feel you can't handle things in life, you phone me. And he said, I found that nearly 25 years on and I'd still got it in the drawer from meeting you. And, and so that wasn't a demonstration of mediumship. It wasn't particularly disciplined. I don't recommend going around and doing that sort of stuff. But there was a moment where a medium was close by to someone who needed and had been calling out to the spirit world for help. And I thought, in this instance, this is what needs to happen. And the influence was there, the power was there, and the moment happened. He's never been to a demonstration of mediumship afterwards. He's never wanted to have readings or healing or anything like that. It was just in that moment he needed what he needed. And the spirit world knew how to create that influence to make it happen.
I've got agreement with my team that if I'm not demming or sitting, but there is a need, that the other party will instigate that conversation.
Yeah.
And invariably it does. I'm going through a terrible time. I've been going seeing all these mediums because I do believe, and I'm sat there with the finger going up and down the back of my head going, oh, really?
Oh, here we go.
Right.
Yeah. And, and I think the thing is that, we're not wanting to go around and just drop the spirit world bomb on people. Like, oh my God, I know one lady who phoned me many years ago, and she just said, oh, I just walk up to people in supermarkets and tell them their loved one's there and then walk away again. I said, wow, that's kind of irresponsible. And she said, what do you mean? I said, you don't know what state that person's in. I said, has anyone ever got really upset when you've told them? And she went, yeah. And I said, and what have you done? She said, well, I've just passed the message and walk away. And I said, so you've opened a can of worms and walked away. I said, if you're going to do that, you need to be able to sit there and support and help that person deal with what you've just dropped on them. I said, what if they were anti-spiritualism and mediums, and you just dropped that on them? I said, you have to be so careful of the implications and the ramifications of what is said. And it's the same with trance. There are, the law does not recognize the spirit world as a third party. And I've seen and heard people say some quite defamatory and problematic things in trance sittings or trance demonstrations, and I've thought, oh, that's worrying, and what's being said and what's being given off is worrying or detrimental or damaging. Luckily, in this country, we don't really have the sue me culture, but in America, psychics are successfully sued for causing emotional distress.
And in Europe as well, there's a couple of cases where financial advice has been given.
So at some point it may turn up here, and here though in courts you kind of have the man in the street version of law that turns around and says, well, if you want to believe someone who says they're talking to dead relatives, that's your lookout. So we have a little bit more rooted kind of legal view of it at the moment, but you never know. Guerrilla mediumship in the frozen food aisle, I like that actually. But I've known that happen. I've known it happen in church demos. I had someone come up to me after a demonstration, and he said to me, oh, while you were working on platform, your auntie was with me, and she said, you must stop taking the pills, they're making you ill. And I went, well, first of all, I haven't got a dead aunt, I haven't got a dead great aunt, and my great aunt is like 80 something and she's still alive. So I've got no dead aunts in my family, and I'm not taking any pills. Oh, it must have been for someone else then. I'm like, that's bad. What if I had been taking pills? What if I had got a dead auntie and I ended up stopped taking important meds? There's an ethic and a discipline. I know we've gone off the topic of trance, haven't we, Mark?
Just slightly, but that's just the way things happen.
That's all right. It's because my meds have kicked in, Lawrence. Speaking of me tablets. No. Oh dear.
But anyway, so Mark, thank you so much. I know you've had a really busy day. I know you've got a carload that needs unloading and everything.
Oh, it's not going to be unloaded tonight, that's for sure.
No,
tomorrow.
Anyone wants some cheap rocks? Get around Brown School.
All we need is a rose quartz.
All you need is a Jemmy.
Yeah. Yes, Susan, I agree. Ethics are vital. And a lot of people don't understand ethical behaviour, full stop. Just because Spirit said it, I've got to do it. No.
Yeah. Oh, God. If that was a viable excuse, I'd be having a field day.
Have they been taken to court because of fraudulent practice? I nearly called you Stuart, Tim, because there have been mediums who have defrauded people, and defrauded people by saying, "Spirit world have told me you've got to pay me money and pay me this." Is that what they've been taken to court for, rather than improper mediumship or unethical mediumship? That might be. I don't know. But consumer protection, actually, it's worth everyone who's on here knowing that healing, mediumship readings, and anything else is covered under consumer rights. So if you have not been provided with the service that you were expecting, you are entitled to a refund. And so Lawrence and many of my students get taught this. At the beginning of sittings, you have a 5 or 10 minute rule. And if at 5 or 10 minutes you or the sitter does not feel the sitting is working, the sitting ends, no money changes hands, no bad. And that way you won't get into problems with, oh, I've been charged for a terrible reading. The worst someone can say about you is, I had a reading, it didn't work, and the medium didn't charge me.
Yeah.
Rather than, I've had a terrible reading and I paid 45, 50 quid, 80 quid, 100 quid, and it was terrible. You have a right to complain.
Yeah.
And if we as a medium didn't feel we had done a good job, we also have the right to turn around and say, do you know what, this sitting isn't working. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'm not the right medium for you. No charge. And that will stop any of that kind of issue. But I think there have been mediums who have been fraudulent and defrauded of money. But it would be interesting to know. If you find that out, Tim, I'd really be interested to know those cases. If you can find them, Tand or whatever, that'd be grand. Always Brilliant. Good to know. Always good to know.
It is. It's not sit there going, oh, look, see what they're going on. It is good to know these things. So
Absolutely.
That we don't make the same mistakes. Quite often mistakes are made through the willingness or neediness or wantonness to help people can actually take us into a realm where we just actually put ourselves right on the line.
Yeah, but there are, unfortunately, like in any profession, there are unscrupulous people who will extort money. You see, all of you that are in Facebook groups will have seen, message me now, send me a friend request for a reading from your ancestors.
It's you! I knew it was you!
I am Spellcaster John. And then you're basically almost putting the fear of your life, your health, your sanity, and your family to pay up for a reading. But some people fall for that. And unfortunately, again, with mediums, I even have known in the past, many, many decades ago, this medium's no longer with us, but I had a sitter come to see me. And he said, what would you say if a medium told you that their loved one was telling them that you were to give them money so that they could open a business or whatever? And I said, I don't think that would happen. He said, well, that's happened in a circle. And then I found out that it had happened on more than one occasion with more than one person. And the medium was giving messages from loved ones to widows and widowers who he knew had money, and was asking them to fund him getting a new house.
Yeah.
So, sadly, this is done. Oh, I know one person. Oh, if you in private, not on here because we're not opening it up. But it would be interesting to know of that case, Tim. It would be interesting to know of that case.
There's 24 people out there now going, I want to know. Well, you're not going.
Everyone's going to start searching and Googling. It's important to know, because also if we're teaching other people, we need to make people aware of stuff that goes on. And also not just from the point of view of saying, please don't you ever do this. So from an ethical point of view, but also so that if you ever come into contact with someone who has been affected, harassed, defrauded, that you actually can say to them, you can take action against this. You can, and we're not wanting to cause upset for people, but I sadly have been involved in a church where the church was defrauded of £250,000. I wasn't involved at the time, mind you, but that was a terrible situation. It did go to court, and somebody was sentenced for it. But the very fact that you would never expect it to happen, because everybody thinks, oh, spiritual movement, everyone's lovely.
Yeah.
People are people, and people, even with abilities, can be dishonest in their nature. Doesn't mean that you can't be a medium and dishonest. You can't be a healer and dishonest. These are faculties, and personality is different to faculty.
Definitely.
So it's one of those things. It's one of my things with people that don't. We are sensitive people. We tend to wear our heart on our sleeve in spirituality. And the problem is that there will be somebody that comes along with a very big knife and shoves it in there at some point in your journey. And then that's often when people will walk away and maybe never come back. But we have to realize that that's people. There are people in any field that would do that to you. It's not just the ism, it's not spiritualism, it's people. And so what's important to you? There's a learning that maybe we've been a little bit too trusting or a little bit naive with people. We've learned, we've experienced, and maybe through that experience, we're going to support someone else who has that experience later on. But we need to know that if there are things that are wrong, that, you shouldn't just think, I can't do anything about this. Sometimes you need to speak up. Sometimes you need to tell people. Sometimes, you need to take action. And that's important. You can, again, not everyone has to like everyone else. You may not like a certain medium. You may not like a certain behavior of theirs. That's fine. That's okay. But we have to be aware that, sometimes we have to speak out. I've had occasion where I've spoken out against things that I've believed were fraudulent in the movement. And I was castigated by a lot of people for doing it, including the person I was trying to protect. And then later on, they turned around and said, I'm really sorry, you were right, weren't you? And I said, I know. But I was only trying to protect you. It was never about me. It was always about protecting someone else and speaking out. But that's the difficulty. We sometimes, we maybe stay silent because we're too worried about the drama that it's going to cause by not saying. By saying something. And and it is difficult because it's all perceptions, it's all our beliefs, and there could be 100 people in a room believing what's going on, and one person who doesn't. The one person who speaks up and says, I don't think this is genuine or real, is the one that gets absolutely pelted by the others just for saying, well, I'm sorry, I don't agree. So it's difficult. It's another area. It's another whole area. Our own individual perceptions of what we see and witness in the seance room. And one of the things I teach my students is I tell them to watch people like Penn and Teller, magicians, because, there's phenomena in the seance room which you can replicate without spirit intervention.
Yeah.
And I said, so just be aware when someone says, oh, it's not possible for this to be done by human hands. Yes, it is. So I always tell my students, go and watch these things, because then at least you can have a little part of you that goes, okay, is that possible? Or is that beyond being replicated in one way or form or another? We shouldn't always take everything at face value in any area of mediumship.
What's his name? Darren Brown?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the stunts he pulls off, you're like, are you sure you're not a medium?
Yeah, a lot of people go, he's a medium and just doesn't know it. But I've come into contact with a lot of professional psychic debunkers, and some of their stuff is really basic tricks that they pull and then say, and that's how the mediums do it. And it's like, no, it isn't. We don't do that. We don't turn around and go, this is the letter of someone in the spirit world that you were just thinking of. That's not what we do. We tell you the information. We don't go, think of someone. Is this who you were thinking of? We don't do any of that. We come with the information, bang, 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 bang. And half the time we may not even be getting much of a response back from a person. But, it's fascinating. We went to see a mentalist at Bournemouth, who actually I think was. I've got a sneaking suspicion he was the support act for Joe Pasquale. I've got a sneaking suspicion. I don't know why, but he actually said, what I'm going to do now is all through purely mentalism. However, he said there is stuff I've seen and witnessed that I can't explain, and I do believe that there is much, much more out there. Whereas Darren Brown does not. It's all a con. Everything is a con. Spiritualism is based on the biggest con of all time, the Hydesville Rappings, and he really slates Hydesville and mediums terribly, whilst taking a lot of money in the process of doing so. So I'm going to save you paying all those spiritualists. Come and pay me instead. Yeah. Not bitter, not jealous. But this mentalist was, I just sat there. I was fascinated by it all, and I just thought he was superb. But he acknowledged this is one way of working. This is another way of working. You know, and so much. So, this is such a fabulous. I love all this. We could sit here for hours. We're in a lock-in now.
Yeah. And Tim there is picking up what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, it's all right relaying verbally what you've seen, what you heard, but it's that presence, that experience, that Absolutely. Is the nail. That is the clincher.
Yeah. And you can when you sit in circles, and even online, when I used to have for a short while, I did have a trance group online back during COVID, and literally I would be sitting and I would feel energy building, and when we went back between the people that were sitting, they all felt the same phenomena at the same time in their individual homes, scattered all over the country. The temperature would drop at the same time, the heat would come in at the same time. Something would happen with one of us on one side of the body, and it would replicate in all the others. And it was fascinating, you know. So, you know, when it comes to the spirit world, there really are no limits. There really are no limits. There's no barriers. There's no boundaries of possibility if we are willing to surrender to that power. Back to the surrender.
Yeah.
Let it come.
Mark, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We can keep going forever.
Thank you, everybody that's joined us tonight. And those people who will be watching this or listening to this later on catch up, welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're back live tomorrow at 11 a.m. BST, and we have Stephen Mager, who has requested an eighth board.
Oh.
So we've got a presentation. I love Stephen's presentations. They're really good. So, catch up with that. Find out what Stephen's got up his sleeve for us tomorrow. Fantastic. In the meantime, thank you, everybody. We could go on for ages.
And we've got, and bear in mind, for those of you who are local to us, and some of you that are not so local to us, we've got the rally, where we've got trance included in that and talks. We've also got the Under the Same Sky event, including a 2-day trance workshop. Also on my website, which I think has been running along next to my name, there's a free teachings page, and the lovely Ashley Oliver, who was on here as well tonight, during lockdown, we did a series of 3 videos on looking at working with the trance state, and those are free videos for you to watch. And those are on the teachings page. So, you know, if you're interested in a bit more to do with looking at the trance states that maybe we've just sort of interested you a bit in what we've talked tonight, maybe have a look at those as well. And if you can get along to us at Pool when we've got the trance demos and trance workshops on it, it would be lovely to see you, because it will be the rallies are fantastic. Susan's with us, and Jason's with us.
Yeah. So lovely Susan and Jason Goldsworthy for the rally weekend.
Going to be fab.
So lots are going on. Mark, absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been lovely.
Again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. And, we shall catch up soon. So a very good night, everybody.
Thanks all. Great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, really good.